Okay, so welcome everybody to this hybrid seminar. There's actually many more people online than there are here in the room with us, but it's wonderful that you can all join online and be here remotely. So this is a seminar organized in part by the Shame in Medicine project here at the University of Exeter. And we're really delighted to welcome Jenny Cunningham here today, who's currently a visiting researcher at the Wellcome Centre for Cultures and Environments of Health, where we're currently based and where our research project is based. And Jenny is a midwife and a PhD student at Kingston University, London, currently doing a PhD project about weight stigma in pregnancy. And she's going to speak to us today about this topic and about some previous research she's done. So I'll hand it over to Jenny. We have an hour, I think, for this seminar, right? So I think you're going to speak for half hours or a bit longer maybe, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. And when it comes to questions, you can raise your hand or even type in the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat as well. But I'll pass it over to Jenny and she's going to share her screen, I think, to share some slides.
Yeah, thank you, Luna, very much. And thanks for coming to my presentation. Very, very delighted to be here. So let me just share my screen. My computer's a bit slow.
Not it bad. Huh?
There we go. Can you all see that? Hopefully you can.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I can't see any of the chats, so I think Luna's going to keep an eye on it. So if anyone wants to kind of just write down any questions or comments, that's absolutely great as we go along. So thank you, Luna. My name's Jenny Cunningham. I'm a midwife. I work part-time for the Royal College of Midwives as one of the research advisors. That's kind of my day job. And I study part-time for my PhD at Kingston University. I'm supervised by two really fantastic academics, Dr. Melania Kalistani of Kingston and Dr. Kirsty Coxon of UCLan, the University of Central Lancashire. And I think, Kirsty, you're here today, so thank you for coming along and listening. So what I'm proposing to talk about today is first some unpublished findings, which I'll rectify later in the summer by submitting for publication a meta-ethnography I did. Then I'll be talking about the research project, including the approach I'm taking, which is Critical Participatory Action Research. And I'd really love to hear any examples or any experience anyone here on the call has about that. I'm really intrigued about how I can make this work as a PhD student. And then we're really lucky, we've got two members of the research collective who are working with me on the project, Catriona Forbes and Amber Marshall, and they're going to talk about, I think they're going to talk about why they got involved and their hopes for the study and maybe their experiences too. So I'll take down the presentation at this stage and they'll be talking. And then, as Luna said, probably half an hour, just under, for a discussion at the end. So I thought I'd start off with the definition of weight stigma, and I particularly like this one. I think it's really inclusive. So weight stigma can be defined as prejudice and discrimination due to weight or body size. It includes the experiences of being stigmatized by others, internalized weight stigma, self-stigma, and anticipated or expectation of stigma, all of which have been linked to negative health outcomes and potentially life-limiting disparities of experience. And this is why I think it's a really important issue, and one which it hasn't really been addressed in maternity, at least in the UK, I don't think, not very well. We don't really engage with it. I like this definition because it includes anticipated weight stigma, which is a real issue for people, and also, of course, self-stigma, which is very endemic across the board too. So first, as I said, I'm going to talk about my meta-ethnography, which I'm sure some of you will know is a type of systematic review, a quality evidence synthesis. So I was looking at qualitative information data. And then my question is here: what are the experiences and perceptions of weight stigma of women with a raised body mass index in maternity care? And I've used raised body mass index of 30 or more kilograms per meter squared, because this is at the level where people will start having conversations about their weight, potentially diet and exercise, and in maternity will be offered an oral glucose tolerance test. As the BMI gets a bit higher, additional interventions are also offered But at this BMI of 30 or more, this is when things start changing. So that's why I've used this as the cutoff. So just for those research nodes amongst us, I used a SPICE strategy. I searched 7 databases, and screening resulted in 33 qualitative papers and theses from around the world. And I published my protocol on Prospero. That's the reference number there. So very briefly, my Prisma charts there shows that I had just over 1,600 records. And as I said, went down to 33 papers, which I included. I just thought it was quite interesting to see where the papers came from. And a good third came from the UK. So the blue segment is from the UK, 12 papers. And North America was fairly well represented. USA and Canada were the orange and the grey. Then Australia and New Zealand, the next two segments, 2 papers each. Denmark, Sweden and Norway, the next 3. And then Turkey and Iran had 1 paper each. And we were really keen to include these 2 middle income countries rather than just the usual suspects. I'd say the data from those 2 papers was fairly descriptive, but we're really pleased to include them in the synthesis. So I'm just going to go straight onto my findings now, rather than talk about any of the kind of work I did to develop them. So I came up with 5 themes, and I've worded them in the first person and 1 in the second person. And I saw this in another publication of a meta-ethnography, and I thought it was a really powerful way to express what the theme was about. And I'd be interested to know if you agree. So these aren't direct quotes, but they express the themes. So the first one is I experienced shame during maternity care, and that was found in all but 1 of the papers. The second one is I'm harmed by your value judgments and preconceptions. I try to resist weight stigma is the third, and I'll just add the first 2 themes, what I would say were the biggest, had the most amount of data in. And then a kind of glimmer of hope here, you support and protect me by seeing me as an individual. And finally, my culture protects me. This was a really small theme, but it was a real point of difference, so I wanted to include it. So I'm just going to go through each theme one by one. I'm just going to read something out here. So the experience of shame was consistent throughout nearly all of the studies and included feelings of guilt and humiliation, as well as those of being judged and blamed. There were also findings that maternity care could be affected by past experience of weight stigma, either from previous healthcare interactions or from family, friends, and wider society. Women experienced internalized weight stigma and negative body image. And a significant aspect of weight stigma during maternity care was mother blame, which was largely communicated through conversations about fetal risks during pregnancy. And we saw that particularly during the scan or the scans. So here's a quote. This isn't just about fat motherhood, but when fat people are told their bodies are to blame for any negative outcome in pregnancy and they are shamed, that shame leads to hiding and silence, and in my case, contributed to anxiety and depression. So I'm harmed by your value judgments and preconceptions. So this theme explores the harm experienced by the women from the attitudes and behaviours of healthcare professionals, so mostly midwives and doctors in maternity, but also the structures of the maternity system in which they worked. Women experienced microaggressions from healthcare professionals, ranging from hurtful and stigmatising language to the lack of provision of appropriate equipment. The routine intervention of being weighed was particularly difficult for some women. Feelings of failure, visibility, and vulnerability were expressed. The act of labelling women as high risk meant that choices were reduced and denied, and women felt alienation from other normal pregnant women. And normal was the word they used, not the word I'm using. And in fact, someone called being weighed a loaded ritual. It was a really difficult thing to do for some. So this is from a study in the UK about the glucose tolerance test. I felt again like I was being penalised because I was fat. I used to say, oh, I've got to do the fat girls test again, have I? All the time I felt that they were picking on you because you were fat, but that's obviously because I knew I was fat. And I just don't need someone to tell me I'm fat, thank you very much. And I think that's a reflection or an example maybe of these microaggressions when people are constantly their size is constantly being referred to. And of course, it's a very unhelpful and potentially damaging thing to do. So I try to resist weight stigma. So this brought together different findings of women using a variety of techniques and approaches to resist. The strategies included trying to find a healthcare professional who was not fat phobic. And this was seen more in North America, where you can choose your maternity provider, but also researching the evidence and strategizing about what to do when you get to an appointment. They also used some of the women experiences of others to advocate for themselves. So in the way that maybe they had a friend who was of high weight and they had a very normal birth, or maybe they had a sister of a lower weight and they had difficulties. So they were trying to say, it's about me as a person, I'm not a statistic. There were also personal beliefs about weight, health and capabilities that women use to resist stigmatizing attitudes and behaviours by healthcare professionals. And here's one in this quote. So this is from a research about parenting kind of blogs. So the authors wrote, they reported that they do not consider their own obesity a negative health issue when they can still live a normal life. And then the woman who posted wrote, for me, obesity is a problem when you can no longer walk to the shop or tie your own shoelaces, not when you can still run with your dog and walk the length of the seafront daily. I am morbidly obese, yet I have no health issues. So she's actually internalized that very medical language, but she's quite right. I would suggest she is healthy, she can walk, she can run. So this fourth theme feels a bit more positive. You support and protect me by seeing me as an individual. So this theme concerns how positive treatment from healthcare professionals gave women support and nurtured them during their maternity care. Women of a higher weight will often express how they feel invisible behind the very visibility of their bodies and kind of lack a kind of human touch, sometimes a real connection with their healthcare provider. But this theme showed that relationship richness and individualised care meant women felt seen, safe, and their pregnancies were enhanced. So there's a great quote here about a birth someone had. It was amazing to work with medical professionals who didn't judge me because of my size and really empowered me to believe in my body because they believed in it. That was the first time I had ever had a medical profession uplift me in that way. Childbirth was the most amazing experience of my life. After that, I had a whole new appreciation for my body, which is an amazing and wonderful thing to read about that transformative care those midwives and doctors gave. So finally, as I said, this was a much smaller quote, theme kind of found in two papers. My culture protects me. Culture, I would suggest, or it did in these papers, included kind of kinship, community and ethnicity. And one study with the majority of African-American women as participants found no weight stigma at all, and were really pushing away any suggestion that they might be diminished because of their size or their weight. And another had findings of Pacific Islanders, amongst other women in the study, who appear to have a lack of concern about their body weight associated with their cultural background. So as I said, these findings mark a real point of difference, which is why I've included them. And here's the quote from the Australian study. Bianca in particular associated her lack of concern about her weight with her cultural background. I'm fine with it, I'm fine with my weight, because I come from a background where they're pretty overweight. I'm a Pacific Islander, I'm from Tonga. So that's in brief the findings from my meta-ethnography, which kind of forms, I think, a kind of good springboard for me to develop my empirical project, which I'll be talking about next. I'm in the process of, I suppose, making final decisions on it. I'm hoping, well, I will be submitting to my ethics committee next month in July and starting to recruit soon after that. But I wanted to talk a bit about my approach and the discussions we've been having up until this point. So now this is a kind of working title still, and Amber, who'll be speaking later, has actually commented on the word enhance. So I'll just read it out. To better understand weight stigma and its effects as experienced by women with a higher weight, again, I've qualified it by the BMI, in UK maternity services, and to explore ways to enhance their maternity care. A Critical Participatory Action Research study, a CPAR study. And Amber, you might speak later about this, but made the point that enhance may suggest more medicalisation. This isn't the what I mean it to do, but so the wording of this might change. But this is my working title for my kind of project at the moment. So I just thought I'd briefly go through CPAR, what it means. Some of you I'm sure will know. So critical, but it should be a focus on questions of power and inequity, which is what I'm seeking to do here, and anchored by those who are most impacted by injustice, which in my case is women and people of a higher weight who enter maternity services. Participation, of course, it's a participatory study. So I'm using the word collective, which is used by Michelle Fine. I'll show you the reference shortly. A collective of researchers centred on those most impacted by the issue being studied. I'll talk a bit more about that. Action, so that's really important. I don't just want to look at the issue, which is really significant in itself, but I would like to find with the research collective I'm working with ways of outlining what changes might be made, maybe some recommendations for me. Of course, I need scholarship outputs, I need to get my PhD at the end of it, but I'll be working with the research collective later on in the study to find maybe other outputs, whether they be creative or policy recommendations, etc. And finally, research, of course, it's got to be a systematic, transparent process, and also in this case, as much as I can, a democratic knowledge production too. So yes, there's a book, I have got it with me in my rucksack, by Michelle Fine and Maria Elena Torre, both American academics. And they've done some amazing work with marginalized groups, women in prisons, LGBTQ+ youths, Black and brown people, and really embedded CPAR in their approaches to a really deep degree, really collaborative, really democratic. So I've been really inspired by their writings. It's not something I can achieve in my PhD, but I'm being inspired by them. I'm hoping to find a way that I can try and make authentic co-production with my group. So I thought I'd just go on to say the kind of discussions we've been having so far. So I put out that yellow squares, the kind of social media ads I put out on social media, on Twitter, particularly because I do quite a lot on Twitter for my job, but also on Instagram. I didn't know, I asked for people of a higher weight with experience of maternity in the NHS, because this is a UK-based study, no previous research experience needed, and to get in touch with me. And I had no idea whether anyone would get in touch with me. It was a bit of an act of faith, I suppose, although I also emailed some people I had connected with right at the beginning of my PhD journey, and Amber Marshall from Big Bertha's, who's speaking later, was one of those. And she kindly offered me a blog for her Facebook group, and also this image went up there, so I think I gathered a few people that way too. So there are 9 members of the research collective at the moment, but I really see this as a group which can kind of have more members, and people could drop out if they wish to. In fact, one member had a baby just as this process was started, so she's not been able to join us. We've had 2 meetings so far, and I've had one-to-one meetings too when people can't make the meetings, because I think it's really important to include people as much as I can to discuss things of importance to them. And I must say the group works really well. People are really respectful and listen to each other, and I've gained an awful lot listening to them, so thank you. So I'm just going to now mention, so the first meeting was very much a getting to know meeting. I shared the findings, unpublished findings I've just shared with you, which I think landed well with the group, which was really, really good to know. And the second meeting I asked them if they talk more about some specifics, so I can make sure my project is designed with women who've had experience of higher weight going into maternity. And one thing really important to get right, of course, is language. And I've been using higher weight, you'll have heard me say higher weight a number of times, and that's the phrase I chose to use for my meta-ethnography. But I didn't know this is still the right thing to use. So we discussed what was appropriate, and higher weight seems to be an acceptable phrase to use. I don't use the word, I'm going to use it now, but I don't use the word obese. I think, well, we know through research it's a stigmatizing word and people don't like it. So it is used occasionally when it's used in other publications, but I will continue to use the word higher weight as much as I can. We talked about methods, whether to use focus groups or interviews. And if so, how many interviews to do. So the group felt interviews was the best way to go, but had a really, really helpful comment by one of the members of the collective that just the word interview was really off-putting. So she didn't think interviews was the right way to go because it sounds very scary. It sounds like a job interview. So the suggestion was I use things like, I want to hear your story, let's have a conversation. So that's the kind of expressions I'm using in my information sheet rather than the kind of formal language of interview. So that was really helpful. And the group felt, I was thinking 2 interviews, but 3 interviews is seen as more beneficial. So one before 24 weeks in early pregnancy, one at end of pregnancy. So hopefully after the birth conversations happened around 36 weeks, because again, place of birth is really critical here. And then postnatally too, the group thought after 8 weeks, between 8 and 12 weeks postnatally. So then we'll capture their kind of birth information as well as some postnatal information too. We also went through what questions should be asked. So I'm going to be using a kind of narrative methodology here, which I've never done before. So it's something I need to learn more about. So have an opening eliciting question about experience, but of course have other questions to bring into. Things around personalisation of care, whether the knowledge of whether you have a choice, do you know you have a choice, that you have informed consent, no one can make you do anything. Are you able to challenge conversations, words, or recommendations that come your way? And also, really importantly, what does good care look like for you? So we have a list of questions which are still being kind of worked up, but I've shared them with the group. And recruitment, the group decided BMI of 30 or more would be the appropriate cut-off again, rather than the higher one, because it would capture people who have all those conversations. There was someone was saying in the hospital where I think she works, or she is, the demographic is a much higher BMI, it's much more common, but of course everywhere is different. So the BMI of 30 or more. And also I was just asking whether it would be appropriate for, say, midwives or obstetricians to take part, and they say definitely yes, that would be actually really interesting, those participants, whether there was any difference to with their data. And the last element I mentioned now is introducing the idea of creative journals or diaries. Now, some people really recoil when I say the word or the phrase creative journals, and I know Catriona, who will be speaking later, was one of those. It just wouldn't sit, well with her. It would really be off-putting. So she would, and Catriona, you can correct me if I'm wrong later on, but thought the idea of a diary, maybe some kind of headings to complete as and when, maybe after an appointment, would be something which would be suitable for her. Whereas for other people, maybe a creative approach might work well. It could be photographs, drawings, paintings, also voice notes someone suggested too. So this isn't to suggest people should be making daily entries, but kind of as and when they want to, and it will be an optional extra to the research. But any researcher I've spoken to said how much data is added to the kind of the findings and how useful it would be. So I'm really keen to include them. And I'll be talking to someone in the Faculty of Arts that's in the pipeline, because I'm not a creative. I know this in my head rather than my heart. So I'm going to talk to someone else, because it was, again, the collective said we need to have examples of how people can do complete journals, etc., rather than just talk to them about it. So I'm really aware that I need to do some more work on that. And just finally to say, my kind of draft information sheet consent form and an advert I have sent round to my research collective for their comments. And I'm fully aware that these women have really busy lives. They work and have young families, and some will want to read the written word and comment, and others won't. That's absolutely fine. I think it's people just, to become involved as much as they like. So I have had some comments, and thank you to those who have sent them to me. And I hope to submit to ethics actually next week. Fingers crossed. So I think I'm just going to stop sharing, I think. Yeah, there's my references. Yeah. Okay, so let's just stop sharing. I'm going to introduce you to two research collective members here today. So we have Catriona. If you say hello, Catriona, you'll appear, I think.
Hello.
There's Catriona, and also Amber.
Hello.
Thank you. So I kind of loosely said to these two, and it's entirely up to you, Catriona and Amber, how you want to pitch it. But I said maybe to talk about why you got involved with the research, why you're part of the collective, maybe what's what you helped to get out of it, maybe some barriers. I'd love to learn again. If anything you say today, obviously I'll be learning from that too. I don't know, we didn't decide what. Do you want to go first, Catriona, and then Amber follows? And I don't think you've got a presentation. I think you're just going to talk from what I know. But over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, I'm Catriona, and I've been involved in the collective. I got involved with the collective as a consequence of seeing the blog post actually on Amber's page, which I've been a member of for some time. And I was a member of it actually before I was considering pregnancy, and then also through my pregnancy, and still am, obviously, as a parent. I think in terms of my experience of why get involved, so I mean, loosely, I once upon a time was interested in research and things myself, but then through pregnancy, I'm not a researcher, I don't have a PhD, just to be clear, but through pregnancy I had quite a lot of experiences, I think, in some respects that I expected to have as a consequence of my BMI. My pregnancy was throughout the COVID year, so as a consequence marked substantially different from expectations right from the get-go, and so everything was kind of navigated solo. I never had a partner at any appointment or able to attend anything, which in itself brought about some of its own experiences, I think. But then in terms of the kind of BMI experience, I guess I went into it expecting certain experiences, and from seeing the kind of call to try and get stories of people, it just felt like an opportunity, I guess, to contribute to something that I guess matters, obviously from a personal perspective, but from the experience, from knowing experiences of others, that there doesn't feel like there's much in the way, societally or globally, who knows, where people of a higher weight are spoken to rather than spoken about. And so I thought that the opportunity to contribute to something that was allowing the voices to be heard of people who are impacted by the talking about and the narrative that exists was just an important opportunity, I guess, to participate in. And so I joined the collective as an experience of that. And it was interesting even hearing about Jenny's previous research and obviously the themes that she'd found. And I know that my initial conversation with Jenny was one-to-one because I couldn't make a group attending, but it was interesting going through it, like how much of it was just like the fact of my experience, I guess, as well. So, I guess in some respects it's reassuring that all of the research actually is the lived experience of people, even if it's not necessarily a positive thing in many respects for a majority. In my own experience, I was incredibly, I mean, the word fortunate shouldn't exist, I guess, for what I'm about to say, but I was fortunate that I had a named midwife throughout who was there for all of my appointments in care, and who very much at no point saw my BMI as any kind of thing to be remotely concerned about. But she often had to play the role of mediator, I guess, in helping me understand the experiences that I was having under the consultant-led care and interpreting a lot of that for me. So yeah, I think it's just interesting that, to have a project that's speaking to rather than about, and engaging with people, knowing that Jenny has the awareness that she's not necessarily speaking from her own lived experience, and to ensure that her research is informed by people who have that lived experience and might then know some of the barriers that there may be in having those conversations with people. So I guess that's it in a nutshell, really, but happy to take questions if anyone had any for me.
Thank you very much, Catriona. That's great, really heartfelt as well. Thank you. Amber,
yeah. Oh, I don't seem to be coming up. Can everybody see me? There we go. Hi, yes. So obviously I now run a website and support group called Big Berthas. So this isn't news for me. My youngest is now 11. So I'm not at the kind of, the cold face of maternity care anymore as a service user. But yeah, I got involved. I'll say this first of all. I do like getting involved in research projects very much. Of the same as Catriona, nothing about us without us. You know, it's really important that researchers do get the responses of people with lived experience, like Catriona's already said very eloquently. So yeah, my experience is nearly 14 years ago now, and 11 years ago now, were very much exactly as the research shows. Plenty of shame, plenty of stigma, plenty of judgment, occasionally really good care. You know, I too, in my second pregnancy, found a great midwife who was very consultative and collaborative, very much like, oh, there's some new research that's come out about such and such you might want to go and have a look at. The obstetrician is likely to suggest this. I know you're going to want to have a go look at the research yourself and read it and find out. I'm not a researcher either. I've not got a research background. I've just kind of stumbled into looking at this stuff and doing the best I can. But my site and the group that we have, and it's a lovely group, we're very much research led. We are very much about evidence-based practice. And I think that's really quite important, because if you're standing up for yourself, which unfortunately we have to do a bit too often, it's really important for those obstetricians or midwives who are telling you, oh, you need to do this because you're high risk of this, or you need to do that, or we're saying that this is the policy for this. You can say, well, what's the reason behind that? You know, what's the rationale? Because I've seen in this that actually the data doesn't show that has any benefit, or you know, there's no data to show that that's a good thing to do, because there's no data to show it's a bad thing to do. There's no data either way. This is just, you know, this is a protocol based on people's best guess, and I'm, you know, I don't want to do that. So there's, yeah, it's really important, I think, to get involved in research, because we've got a lot to offer. We've got, and it's lovely that Jenny, as Catriona's already said, Jenny's got a lot of insight, but she's also got a lot of self-awareness that, you know, there is stuff that we will sometimes come up with. And I've seen it again and again in conversations I've had in other research projects where, you know, a researcher, and it's easy to do, you kind of get focused on your work and you do something and you're like, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then somebody who's been there goes, oh, what about that? Have you considered that? And the person just, it's something they wouldn't even think of, because they weren't there, they haven't been there. But I'd like to say, in the 10 plus years I've been running the site and running the Facebook group, that things have got better, and they have. I've definitely seen improvements in care. I've definitely seen, you know, people come back to our group and sort of say, oh, you know, I had an excellent experience with a midwife, I had an excellent experience with an obstetrician. But we are still getting the same old, the same, you know, flippant comments from midwives about, oh, the reason you've got this is because of your weight. The reason this has happened is because of your weight. When of course they can't say that. Those outcomes happen to people of all shapes and sizes. The fact that, you know, I'm marginally more likely to have that experience because of my BMI, it's only a small distinction. And the same kind of, we're getting these same comments on scan reports, for example. You know, the woman goes into her scan, she has, or I say woman birthing person goes into their scan, they have, you know, what ostensibly seems a perfectly fine situation. The sonographer says, oh, yes, I've got all the measurements I need, everything seems fine, brilliant, off you go, kind of thing. And she or they get home, open their midwifery notes to find that it says, oh, you know, blah, 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 but suboptimal imaging due to maternal habitus. So once they've consulted a dictionary and realised what that, you know, medico waffle is all about, oh, hang on a second, they're saying they couldn't get what they needed because I was fat. Well, hang on a second, when I was in the scan, they said everything was fine. So which is true? And these things kind of create anxiety for people, and they're not helpful. I was lucky enough to be involved in some research as a parenting science researcher with a parenting science gang. And that was very interesting, certainly to be at the other side of the coin, because I've never done it before. And we found in that research, so we decided to research kind of people who'd had two experiences. And we found there that people very clearly avoided wanted care in second and subsequent pregnancies because of the treatment they'd had in their first, because sometimes that's the only way to protect yourself. So, you know, I think as much information as possible being put out there by this research and any other about how negative impacts on, because of weight stigma in care, can actually lead to worse outcomes in the long run, is really important, because I think a lot of professionals think that by telling us these things, by pointing out we're fat as if we don't know, and all the terrible things that might or might not go wrong with our pregnancies, that they're actually helping us and informing us to be better people in the future and to go and lose weight and be a healthier mum next pregnancy. Well, our research showed that nobody went away deciding to go and lose weight and be a better person for the next pregnancy. What they did decide to do was avoid those healthcare professionals, and that's clearly not in anybody's best interest. And, you know, in my experience, my pregnancies were both absolutely amazing. Nothing went wrong. Everything was great. The second one was a home birth. And it's just like, yeah, I wasn't led to I wasn't led to expect that. I was led to expect everything was going to go wrong. And that really wasn't very fair and wasn't a very nice thing to do to somebody who's having potentially the best and most amazing experience of their lives. You know, I think people should be allowed to enjoy their pregnancies. I think people should be allowed to marvel in the absolute amazing things our bodies can do. And yeah, and I wish we didn't get squashed so much by being told that how terribly everything might go, when really the risks are only marginally different. Okay, they're higher, but they're not that much. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Amber. That's great.
Do you want to say anything to wrap up, Jenny? Or
Oh, I hadn't thought about a wrapping up sentence, but but I really, well, as well, I would say thank you so much to Catriona and Amber to this research. Yeah, it's a kind of, as I was trying to explain, I'm not always that articulate, but I really want this to be as much as collaborative as possible, as co-produced as possible. But as a PhD student, I know there is a kind of barrier that I can't pay you for your time, for instance, so I can't call you a researcher. So it's, but, you know, anyone with experience here, I'd be very grateful to hear. But yes, for me, it's a real privilege working with these women. I feel, I suppose it feels a validation for what I want to do. As you both say, I'm not a woman of a high weight. I'm also haven't been pregnant recently either. So I really need your kind of your input, your experience to make sure we all get it right together. Thank you.
great, thank you. If you join me in thanking Jenny and her research collective members. So we've got about 20 minutes for discussion and questions, and I'll open it up to the floor. So if you do have any questions, you can raise your hand in your virtual hand in the Zoom call, or just type in the chat if anyone has any questions. Or Jenny or Amber or Catriona. I mean, I can kick off while people are gathering their thoughts. So, so the research project, or one of them that I'm working on, is the Shame and Medicine project, where we see shame. One of the ways that shame affects healthcare is that it can act as a potent treatment barrier and lead to, like what you were saying, Amber, avoidance. So like people who the second time round just avoid or withdraw from certain types of care because of shame. And I wonder if there are other ways that shame is getting in the way of people's successful kind of contacts with healthcare professionals, or if anything's come up in the meta-ethnography that you looked at, or in experiences that Amber and Catriona have had.
So I just kick off, you two, you might have something to add. Just, it did appear very lightly in the, that's the right research expression, very minimally in the findings. So there was a couple of comments about people who thought about not going for the next appointment because they felt so much shame, or they were fearful of that healthcare professional. But I think once someone's pregnant, it's what I'm picking up, and I have kind of researched this particularly, is that people will see their healthcare provider, they'll see their midwife, particularly. They won't always see their doctor, because I think, as Catriona has explained, in fact, both explained, if you have a good relationship with your midwife particularly, they're with you on that journey, whereas popping in to see a doctor and obstetrician can be a bit more challenging. But I would say, unlike other healthcare, when you might not see your doctor because you're fearful of shame, I think when you're pregnant, you do access maternity care because it's for you and your baby. Yeah. But I think might happen is people might not want to have a second child because of the treatment they've received. And I've heard this anecdotally, but again, I don't know whether the evidence out there for saying that. So I think that perhaps is a bit of a difference between weight stigma and healthcare outside maternity. I would suggest
that's a really interesting point.
Do either of you two have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely agree, because from what I hear from my own experience and people in our group, most of us often haven't been to the doctor very often for a long time, because it's just not worth the bother. Whatever it is you've got, often you'll go and see somebody and they'll immediately suggest that you lose weight, be it for an ingrowing toenail or a, whatever it is. It's, there's always a, oh, have you considered losing weight? As if, yeah. So, but of course, you're absolutely right. With maternity, there's a whole different thing there. You have to attend pretty much. So, we're very much in our group, we're very much about encouraging people to attend their appointments. We're very much about, encouraging people not to withdraw from maternity care, but how to challenge it and how to appropriately kind of go, actually, do you know what? You don't have to see that medical professional ever again if you don't want to, but do go and see another one. Go and discuss this. You can complain to pals. You can, speak to a senior midwife and explain the problem and how you don't want to see that obstetrician again, or you don't want to see that midwife again. And those concerns should be both escalated and respected. And that can be quite helpful to people to know that they don't just have to put up with it, because I think a lot of us think we do just have to do what we're told, and actually you don't.
Yeah, and what was interesting is in one of the collective meetings, our second meeting, there was a conversation about it wasn't even about accessing or visiting your doctor in pregnancy, but in preparation for pregnancy. So where people knew that they were planning to try and get pregnant, there are guidelines that state that over a certain BMI, you need to be taking an increased level of folic acid for preparation for pregnancy, and obviously throughout that first 12 weeks of pregnancy. And even when members of the collective were fully aware that that is the guidelines and that's what they should do, they did not make that appointment to go and get that medication in order to do the preparation. They did things like self-overtake the usual ones that you can buy over the counter, so that they knew they were getting a higher level of medication. It wasn't the 5, whatever the MCG stands for. It wasn't the 5 that the recommendations are. It's obviously still below that, but it's higher than the standard level. So there was almost a sense of self-management to avoid engaging with healthcare practitioners, because the sense was that if approaching healthcare practitioners to ask for that in order to start trying for a baby, then the conversation wouldn't be about what they were asking for. It would be about the fact that they should not be trying for a baby in the weight or the BMI category that they were in at that point. So yeah, I guess in terms of barriers, the for want of a better word, compliance of attending appointments tends to kick in when it's not necessarily about you alone. It's also about the care of your baby. But even if you have the awareness of there are things that you should or shouldn't do in preparation in advance of that, you won't necessarily engage. Came up as kind of one of the interesting kind of barriers that, there was a few of us in that room kind of expressing these things about the lack of engagement in advance, because obviously a decision had been taken to try for a baby, whether it was within the BMI or not.
Yes, thank you for that, Katrina. You're quite right. That was a really interesting discussion. It's something I hadn't thought about. So there you go. This is why it's so important that you're here.
There's a couple of comments in the chat. Bryony's just asking if the meta-ethnography is published, which I think it's not published.
It's not published yet. Thanks for asking, Bryony. I have a deadline. I've told my supervisors, Kirsty's smiling, so on the 17th of August, I'll be submitting for publication. So hopefully in the autumn, before Christmas. I'll let you know. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. And then there's, I don't know if you can read that yourself.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Given the questionable merit of BMI as an indicator of health, what are your feelings about not focusing on weight at all, but rather discussing healthy eating, exercise? Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, personally, I don't like the expression healthy eating. I think I don't know if this is normal. I think healthy eating means different things to different people. For some people it means cutting out carbs, some people it means being vegan, for some people it means, I don't know, intermittent fasting. So I don't personally like that phrase anyway. I think kind of eating well, I think eating well suggests eating socially and nutritiously too. But that aside, I suppose it wouldn't be a bad thing if everyone's had that conversation, rather than, I suppose, just talk about women with a BMI, a raised BMI, kind of higher weight women. I would suggest, again, Amber and Katrina, you can correct me or build on this if you like. I think most women and people with a high weight have dieted in their lives and know very, very well what their perception of a healthy diet should be, what a calorie, how many calories in an egg or a salad or a sausage or whatever. So I think there's a lot of knowledge that people hold about eating, what they should and shouldn't eat, in inverted commas, should and shouldn't eat. Exercise is maybe a little bit different. I know lots of people are a bit anxious about exercising and damage they might do to themselves or their babies. So maybe, I know that's something as midwives we should be talking about diet and exercise to everyone. I would always suggest that whatever people do outside pregnancy, they continue to do in pregnancy unless it's something dangerous. But yeah, I'm not sure. I think this is something which I will be finding out a bit more, I think, as I go along. Anyone else got comments about that? Because I haven't got a good answer. Amber?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much more interested in looking at people individually and looking at kind of where there's, because that's one thing you get quite often as well. You get flippant comments about, oh, you need to cut out the junk food, or you need to cut out the biscuits and cakes, without ascertaining whether I eat junk food or biscuits and cakes or chocolate or whatever it is. You've taken one look at me and assumed I consume on a regular basis, which may or may not be true. And so, yeah, it's very important to assess where people are at, what sort of level of exercise are you doing? Oh, well, have you considered doing a bit more, or, that kind of thing, rather than saying, oh, you must do this, when somebody might be doing in excess of that. But yeah, it's really tricky because it's also very interlinked with cost. A lot of exercise has cost attached, and you can say, oh, well, it's easy, you just go for a walk, that has no cost. No, it does have a cost, because you have people driving past you shouting stuff out their windows. That has a very big cost, not a financial one, but a cost. And so people who are kind of just saying, from ivory towers, oh, you need to do more of this, or you need to do more of that. There is so much to unpick and so much to investigate within that. I was really lucky in my pregnancy. I actually worked in a trust, in a NHS trust, that had free antenatal exercise classes I could attend the entire year. It was 9 months of pregnancy and the year afterwards, and it was brilliant. It was so good. But unfortunately, there's no. That was obviously quite a while ago. That was more than a decade ago. There's no money for those kind of things right now. So there's so much more in this environment in terms of just talking about, even in terms of eating healthily, in terms of getting more fruit and veg. We know full well, how expensive kind of, a whole food, whole grain fruit and veg diet is versus eating processed stuff. It's really tricky.
Thank you.
There's a comment from Ruth in the chat. Can you read that?
Yeah, Ruth says, thank you so much to all for sharing your thoughts. My research is concerned with the potential harms of stigmatizing weight-centric policy and with a focus on experiences of families. So I'm interested in post-pregnancy issues faced by higher-bodied parents. Like you, Jenny, I'm concerned with the term healthy eating. Thank you, Ruth. We'll have to connect outside this meeting, I think.
Yeah, on the topic of BMI, I'm just perplexed why it's still used as a thing in health services when it's so contested and
it's so easy and so cheap, isn't it?
Is there no other, because it's about trying to discern a health risk, is there no other indicator that could do that doesn't have to be about BMI? Is it just that it's just an easy thing to splash across a population?
I think there's also kind of calipers people can use, but of course, or weight, waist hip ratio, but of course you can't do that in pregnancy. But again, it doesn't tell you about health, does it?
No, that's the thing. So weight and health aren't necessarily correlated. So why do it anyway?
Yeah, I do question that too, but that seems really heretical to say that publicly. I don't know whether anyone else out there thinks we should stop weighing people, stop working at BMI in pregnancy.
Because I told you the story of my son who's in reception had his height and weight done, which they do across populations. I didn't know you could opt out, but I don't think we would have opted out anyway. But we then got a letter in the post a couple of weeks later saying that in the child BMI calculator, he's overweight. There wasn't any nuance to that. It was just like, your child is overweight, and he's not overweight. I think he's got he does have a big head. So I think maybe the weight of his head is skewing the BMI or something, but because he's kind of skinny. So it was inaccurate, but then it was also quite shaming because we got the healthy eating pamphlets, and, and I think I was saying this to you already, I couldn't imagine any family receiving that information and that letter where it would make a positive change. It would either land as shaming, as it did for us, or just lead to, you just throw it away, or it might make you feel defensive, or, so I couldn't imagine that intervention. I was just wondering why Devon.
I think it's UK wide, but there's also no evidence it has any benefits. And as you suggest or say, is like to have harmful.
It could actually harm more than it would do any good, if it does any good at all.
But then you'll see in the National Audit Office or whoever collects statistics. So children are now, this kind of fright, this obesity epidemic we have, and the children.
And my child,
that's where it comes from. That's where
absolutely
that data comes from. These national.
And my child will be counted as one of the overweight children, which for me is kind of hilarious because he's not overweight at all. But which is completely inaccurate. And
so why do it?
And there was a little disclaimer on the letter saying the child BMI calculator may not be accurate for a bunch of reasons. And it's like, well, then why do it? Why distress people?
So indeed. I concur.
Ruth has written. Okay, so there's a couple more comments there from Ilavali. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
I'm looking at postnatal interventions to reduce cardiovascular disease risk for women who've had high blood pressure in pregnancy. Okay. Weight management is one of the main strategies looked at, but I'm questioning the value of it given all the issues you've raised today. Yes, indeed. That's a really, really difficult intervention you're taking, you're looking at, I think, because diets don't work. So, a weight management is really a diet, I think, isn't it? It's called by another name. And even the diet industry's statistics or evidence that shows us that diets don't work. So I haven't got the answer, but it seems to me the statistics show if you go on a diet, you put more weight on after 2 years. So actually weight management is kind of does the opposite effect. But of course, I understand exactly, Ruth, that you want to really importantly reduce cardiovascular risks in women with high blood pressure. But whether weight management is how you do it, I don't know. It's beyond my knowledge and experience. I don't know if anyone else on the call has got an opinion or some information about this.
Oh, hiya. Yeah, I'm aware of some studies in terms of not particularly in a postnatal group, but I know there were some researchers a couple of years ago who were looking at reducing high blood pressure with beetroot juice, apparently had been shown in other studies. And so they wanted to extrapolate it because there was no adverse effects shown in pregnancy of taking beetroot juice, because it's not on any kind of, there's no mechanism by which it should be harmful. I've no idea whether that research even went ahead. I was just involved in an early stage and kind of suggested, for one thing, that they might, because they were just going to give it to all people with a high BMI. And I said, well, are you going to exclude for people with a high BMI who have low blood pressure? And that blew their minds, because they didn't consider that could even be a case. And I'm like, yeah. It's just one of those examples where you think, oh God, I'm glad I was in the room. But I don't know what, but I think there's other ones about maybe like pistachio nuts, or I can't remember what the other thing that, I think there's been quite a lot of studies about varying like dietary interventions. But yeah, I fully agree with Jenny that in terms of just looking at weight loss as a cause and effect, often if you are going to research that, fine, but make sure you account for all the other confounding behaviours that go with weight loss attempts. So it might be that they reduce alcohol intake as a result of kind of, going for this healthy lifestyle kick, and reducing calorie intake. It might be they start getting more exercise. It might be they sleep better, and often researchers forget. And so they kind of go, oh, weight clearly shows an effect on this. And actually, but you haven't adjusted for everything else. And of course, it really is difficult to adjust for everything else. So yeah, I would tread with caution. But obviously, high blood pressure is something that is problematic in pregnancy or postnatally or just generally. So it's a good thing to look at, but you might well be right that weight might not be the mechanism to do it.
Mel has made the comment, beetroot juice can have small impact in some groups, but at high levels can have unpleasant side effects.
I can imagine what they might be.
Thanks, Mel.
Okay, great.
And so Ruth's written about Canada making incremental moves away from weight as a dominant determinant of health. So there's hope, yeah. Although I did read I didn't think the pregnancy guidelines had particularly changed at all, actually. Because I know obesity, again, sorry to use the word, but in the guidelines for Canada, you have to have one other comorbidity or morbidity for it to be a problem, not just weight. But I think in maternity, I think the pregnancy guidelines didn't have that. Anyway, I could be misrepresenting them here. And Kirsty says, yes, US recognise weight stigma as an issue, but we don't, we don't in the UK, do we? It's not really spoken about at all, but we're talking about it today, which is good. Yeah.
Jennifer's last comment here is.
Oh, sorry, I was working down them.
Oh, sorry.
Speaking of confounders, what of stress? Yes, Jennifer McClellan, exactly. What of stress and all this stigma on heart health? Looking at the inflammaging, is that a word? Work of racist microaggressions, you're absolutely right. And
inflammaging.
inflammaging. Thank you. What does that mean?
It's basically the aging of your heart and your body through chronic stress, and all the hormones that rage around your body because of that. It's been identified in work. I want to say a London University, West London maybe, as a consequence of the microaggressions experienced in a racist society.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
From what Amber, Katrina, and your meta-ethnography are saying is there's perhaps some unfortunate parallels here.
There is a researcher in America, and I'm sorry, I'll try to remember her name, but she's looked at hormones and stress around weight and has shown again, and I don't know what to agree, but it is a physical effect. Experiencing weight stigma, it's physically damaging as well as psychologically damaging. So thank you, Jennifer, for bringing that up.
Great, well, we've got basically 1 more minute. Does anyone have any final questions or comments before we wrap up? And thank you for all the comments and questions in the chat. It's been really rich discussion in the chat there as well.
Can we keep the chat? Could I just ask?
Yes, because this is recorded, the chat's recorded. Yeah. So if there isn't any final question or comment, if you just join me in thanking Jenny again and Amber and Katrina again as well for their contributions. It was really fascinating to hear about this project and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it develops. Yeah, I think everyone would be. So thank you for coming, everybody. Great to see so many people online. We've got to go and eat all the biscuits now.
Yeah, we've got biscuits here, everyone, sorry. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.